The following is an interview with Ehtmam from the Forum Against Corporatization and Militarization in India, or FACAM. I've interviewed Ehtmam on Marxism Today before, but today he'll be speaking about the recent murder of the General Secretary of CPI Maoist, as well as the broader implications for the Maoist movement, its current state, and the fascist offensive going on in India against the people. This interview is extremely rich, and Ehtmam is extremely knowledgeable. I encourage you to watch it the whole way through, as Ehtmam not only provides a detailed overview of the current political situation in India, but also speaks about the reasons for optimism, despite the challenging circumstances and the setbacks the movement has faced. And as always, please remember to like and subscribe to Marxism Today, as it helps us out tremendously. Okay, today we are once again joined by Comrade Ehtmam from FACAM. Comrade, would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Comrade, for having me again. My name is Ehtmam Haq. I am a lawyer and an anti-displacement activist associated with Forum Against Corporatization and Militarization. It is a joint platform of progressive organizations and individuals based in the Indian capital, Delhi. We sympathize with all the people's struggle being carried out by the people in the country against imperialist loot, corporate loot that is happening in mineral-rich regions of the country.
And so today, we're having you on to talk specifically about the larger situation going on with Operation Kagar, the peace talks, but in particular, the recent killing of the General Secretary of CPI Maoist, the execution of him by state forces. Can you explain just what happened here? It's made international news, parties around the world and organizations have put out statements decrying the actions of the Indian government. So what happened and how did it come to be that the General Secretary of CPI Maoist was killed by the state forces?
So what we know of this incident is that on 21st May, we started getting news from the early morning itself. There is a big anti-Maoist operation being carried out in Abujma guerrilla base of the CPI Maoist, and thousands of paramilitary forces are engaged in encircling a Maoist squad where supposedly there was a big Maoist leader present. So we were following the news, and by the midday, we got to know that CPI Maoist General Secretary Comrade Nambala Keshav Rao alias Basavraj was murdered in that bombing operation. What we have come to know about it is that according to the CPI Maoist Special Zonal Committee statement, they have said that multiple deserters over the period of a month or two went towards the enemy side because of the intensified military operations being carried out against the rebel forces. And these deserters gave inputs about the movement of leaders, the movement of Nambala Keshav Rao himself, and how Maoists conduct themselves, how they take shelter, and all of those logistical aspects. That led to the putting up of all intelligence reports together by the top intelligence officials and top intelligence agencies involved in these operations. As we have all before discussed, that Indian state had established a joint command center to carry out anti-Naxal operations. That joint command center was set up post 2010 when, with the aid of US, Indian state formed this National Technical Research Organization. So whenever these kind of inputs come, they track these kind of, with the help of these informations, they carry out surveillance in those regions and follow the pattern and everything. And probably that is what led to the pointing out of a probable location where CPI Maoist General Secretary was present. So according to the state version, the encounter started on 19th of May itself. And from 19th of May till 21st of May, until his martyrdom, there were multiple exchange of fires where the Maoist rebels were able to escort him safely out of the encirclement, though they were not able to break the encirclement completely, but they were able to safely escort him away from the attacking forces. But due to the heavy presence of security personnel, the use of advanced level of weapons like advanced automatic rifles, presence of Israeli manufactured Heron Mark II drones, Russian made helicopters, the complete might of Indian military was put to the task to like encircle him, flush him out, and then kill him. So ultimately on 21st of May, that whole operation that was conducted by the state came to its conclusion when they were able to kill all of the Maoist rebels that were protecting the top leader, Basavraj. And according to the Maoist statement, when all of their comrades were killed, Basavraj was captured alive, and then he was tortured and killed. As has been in the case of Kishanji in 2010 also, he was captured alive and then he was tortured and killed. So most probably when we say that he was captured alive, he might have also been killed, although the Indian state burnt his body forcefully, did not hand it over to his family in the fear that he'll be turned into a martyr and a Maoist hero for the Indian people. We cannot know. We have our apprehensions, which is not just presumptions, but rooted in materiality and past experiences, how Maoist leaders are treated when they are captured. So we can say that he must have been tortured and then killed. But as far as proofs go, we would never know because the Indian state burned his body forcefully without handing it over to the family. So that is how it came to an end. But what is important to point out here is that Nambala Keshav Rao was killed when the Maoist party has declared a unilateral ceasefire to create a conducive environment for peace talks. When a rebel force that is citizens of the particular country itself, where it is engaging in an armed struggle against the state, has declared a ceasefire, it is the responsibility of the state which claims to strive for a peaceful resolution of this so-called conflict. It is the responsibility of that state to respond positively to that ceasefire, and then engage in the peace talk that is being appealed by the masses of the country. Multiple organizations, dozens of people's organizations and intellectuals, civil society organizations, democratic rights organizations have appealed to both the Maoist party and the state to come forward for a peace talk, because in this past 16 to 18 months, almost 500 people have been killed by the Indian state. And among those 500 people, one third of them are unarmed Adivasi villagers. One third of them were Maoist rebels who were caught when they were recuperating from ill health, or when they were caught somewhere else conducting a meeting with the villagers unarmed. They were caught and they were tortured and then they were killed. As we have learned in the case of one of the Dendakaran Special Zonal Committee member, Comrade Ehtmam, when she was taking shelter in a village and she was recuperating from ill health, she was caught and then she was tortured and killed. So in this kind of scenario, the people of this country, the concerned citizens of this country, appealed to the Indian state and the Maoist party that they should come forward for a peace talk, create a condition for a peace talk, and discuss whatever the questions that underline this whole armed struggle, portraying that it is the people's interest at their hearts. The CPI Maoists came forward for a peace talk. They immediately responded. The Central Committee, despite such a big military offensive being waged against them, they responded very swiftly, very positively to that appeal. And they said that in the interest of the people, they are ready for a peace talk if the government creates certain kind of conducive environment for it. And in that whole line of efforts, they also declared a unilateral ceasefire. But the state went on to kill one of its top leaders. So it shows this Indian state's genocidal intent also, that it does not want to resolve the political questions. It does not want to solve people's problems, but it just wants to erase the people itself.
Yeah, it certainly does. And the massive deployment of troops has been quite astounding to see. I read that in this particular operation, around 20,000 police forces were involved. Is that accurate?
Ryan, actually, that is true, but this operation is the previous one, actually, which was conducted to encircle Karegutta forest. That operation, being part of larger Operation Kagar, was termed as Operation Black Forest. So basically, there is this 300 square kilometer stretch of hilly forest on the Telangana-Chhattisgarh border. That forest's name is Karregatta. Literally, Karregattu means black forest. So that whole operation was termed as Operation Black Forest. That operation went on for almost 20 days. That operation was concluded just days before this operation to kill Comrade Nambala Keshav Rao was being initiated. So this operation which killed Comrade Nambala Keshav Rao was in succession of the Operation Black Forest that was being conducted at Karregatta Forest. So in Karregatta Forest, there was a big Maoist base where they had weapon manufacturing units, they had big stash of ration, medical supplies, and it was kind of a unified command center for them. So the Maoists brought out a statement 2 months ago saying, appealing the people not to go inside Karregatta forest because they had laid landmines around the Karregatta forest to protect their unified command center or the base, their military base. Soon after that, there was a massive mobilization of forces from Chhattisgarh side as well as from Telangana side. Central Reserve Police Forces, Greyhound, that is the elite anti-Maoist force from Telangana, Commando Battalion for Resolute Action, Cobra Force from Chhattisgarh, then Special Task Force from both of the states, C-60 commandos from Maharashtra side. There were multiple elite forces, paramilitary and police forces that were mobilized in somewhere to the tune of 20 to 26,000 of paramilitary forces were involved in carrying out this operation. They encircled this whole area. Then throughout the day, there were multiple sorties of drones being carried out over Karregattalu Hills. Then there were helicopters carrying out machine gun fire. There was intense shelling of mortars and artillery in that region. This operation went on for almost 21 days. During this entire operation, state did not reveal any of the casualties that were happening from its side or on the side of the Maoists. They were not coming out with any clear, specific report of what is going on. There were multiple reports of like hyped up reports of massive Maoist casualties happening on the Sanghi media, the corporate media that is there in India these days. They were hyping the reports to carry out this whole psychological warfare, and they were also kind of doing an extensive warmongering against the Maoists, justifying their decimation. But the state's official statement was not coming. So this whole operation, although it was in the face of everybody, it was shrouded in secrecy, as in like there were no concrete information about what was happening. There was no day-to-day input about what all successes were made. But we got to know that the Maoists had fortified that area very well, and there were around, according to state's own inputs, were around somewhere from 300 to 1,000 Maoist rebels taking on almost 26,000 paramilitary forces. So that is in itself a great feat if one sees it from a military standpoint. And they were able to withstand that kind of military operations where armed forces, air forces were involved. And in the later days, they were able to escort the top leadership, multiple central committee members were there according to the state's input, and they were able to break the encirclement and escort multiple central committee members out of that encirclement. Soon after this operation ended, or like the operation did not end, it kind of downsized because of all the warmongering that was happening with Pakistan, and Indian state had to mobilize its troops to the Pakistan border, and also because of its inability to deal heavy blow to the Maoists militarily in Karregatta forest. They toned down that operation and they withdrew the forces and came out with a statement that they killed 31 Maoists. and they recovered multiple weapons, lot of ammunitions, lot of explosives. They said that they were able to demolish 3 of the arms factories that were built by the Maoists in that region. They were able to burn huge dump of almost 1200 kilograms of food grains that was dumped by the Maoists there. They were able to destroy a lot of medical supplies that were there. But as far as numerical losses is concerned, there are conflicting reports, because there have been reports in Telugu media, and as well as local buster media, that, and which is also a claim made by a lot of human rights activists on ground, such as Soni Sori herself, who is a prominent Adivasi activist and human rights activist working on ground, who has herself faced most brutal form of state repression when she was gang raped and stones were stuffed in her private parts in like early 2010 period. So she herself has said that more than 20 people killed among 31 were unarmed villagers. So it is very much possible that people who were there in the hamlets of Karigutta forest were captured and were killed. There are also reports that Telangana Greyhounds had captured 11 villagers in Karagutta, on the outskirts of Karagutta Hills, who were, according to them, Maoist sympathizers, and were giving them informations or like providing them with food and everything. They were captured, and soon after they were captured, there was a crossfire between the Telangana armed forces and the Chhattisgarh armed forces. And in that whole chaos, they they lost some of their members, and then they killed all those 11 people to cover up that crossfire, saying that they got killed in exchange of fire with those 11 Maoists. And then there have been multiple reports of multiple serious casualties to security personnel due to the extensive level of IDs that were improvised explosive device that were laid around the Karagattalu hills by the Maoists. But the state has completely like covered, like shrouded that whole information to not let the world know that it has also suffered militarily in this whole operation. Not only failed to decimate the Maoist senior Maoist leadership and the battalion number 1 of the People's Liberation of Guerrilla Army, but has also suffered militarily, where dozens of its soldiers suffered heat strokes and were hospitalized. Multiple of its paramilitary forces were severely injured in improvised explosive device blasts, and multiple of its forces were killed in the exchange of fire with the CPM Maoist forces. But they completely downsized it, and then they came out and said that 31 Maoists were killed. After this claim, there have been multiple appeal and multiple demands from the opposition party, one of the biggest opposition party in India itself, Congress party itself, which has once carried out one of the most brutal military offensive against the Maoist party, has itself said that this whole Karagata operation is very shady, and this demands inquiry, because with the way it has been conducted and the level of secrecy that surrounds it, it is very much possible that the innocent villagers, the unarmed villagers, were also killed in this whole operation. So, Karagata operation is a slightly different operation from the operation that led to the martyrdom of Basavraj. It was conducted in South Bastar, and the martyrdom of Basavraj has happened in North Bastar, in Abujmar forest. So it's a two different geographical position areas, although in the same guerrilla zone, but two different geographical areas and two different terrains also, and two different operations.
Thanks for clarifying. It's very helpful to get such a detailed account, especially where for international audience and for those of us who support the popular movements in India, it's hard just getting the narrative filtered through the Sanghi media into international media. And in light of the context you provided, it's very clear the state narrative has a number of, well, obvious holes in it to cover violations of human rights and whatnot, but also paints a very different picture than the reality on the ground in terms of the war they're fighting against the Maoists and a war against the people more broadly. Before getting into the peace talks, which I want to come to in a minute, I was just wondering, could you talk a little bit about Comrade Basavraj's life? Who was he? How did he come to be the General Secretary of CPI Maoist? There's some information that I'm sure people have come across on the internet, but just getting a little bit of sense of his history and how he became a top Maoist leader and such an experienced communist.
Comrade Basavraj was an engineering student, as far as I know. He was a student of Regional Engineering College, and he was pursuing engineering there. And he was one of the founding members of Radical Students Union. That was a revolutionary student organization that has been associated with the erstwhile CPIML People's War. And he was also instrumental in participating in the go to village campaigns that were conducted by Radical Students Union. In the period of go to village campaigns, RSU had conducted go to village campaigns in almost 2,147 villages, and they integrated with the masses. They got to know about the problem of the masses. They formed committees there. They mobilized the peasants to strive for ownership of the land. And from then onwards, after that, Comrade Basavraj went underground in 1985, and he was part of one of when the Dandakaranya guerrilla zone perspective was charted out by CPIML, erstwhile party CPIML People's War. 5 squads were sent in the Dandakaranya forest, that is Bastar, the 7 districts of Bastar, 3 districts of Maharashtra, 3 districts of Telangana, and some areas of the Odisha and Andhra Pradesh also. This whole vast stretch of almost 40,000 square kilometer of forest area is called Dandakaranya. So the CPIML People's War decided to build its guerrilla zone and carry out its strategy of protected people's war by basing itself in Dandakaranya. And when 5 of those squads were sent, Nambala Keshav Rao was commander of one of the squads, that was Ganganna squad. So from then onwards, after that, soon after, he was chosen as a member of the forest committee that was formed in Dandakaranya to carry out the struggles and mobilize the Adivasi peasants against Tendu leaf contractors and forest officials, who are basically the embodiment of the feudal authority in these regions. So soon after that, he very swiftly rose up the ranks of the Maoist party. And in 2018, Comrade Nambala, before becoming the General Secretary, he was inducted into the Central Committee and the Politburo. He was also part of Central Military Commission, which is the armed wing of the Maoist party, which strategizes the whole People's War, which draws out its tactics and everything. So he was also part of the Central Military Commission. So effectively, he was part of all 3 major organs of the party in the People's War. And in 2018, when the previous General Secretary of the CPI Maoist, Ganapati, stepped down due to ill health, Basavraj was given the responsibility in 2018 to carry out the responsibility of the General Secretary of CPI Maoist. And if you look at it, since 2017, the Maoist party has been facing intensified military operations since its inception. Since the inception of the whole Naxalite movement itself, it has faced brutal military offensive, from Operation Steeplechase to Salavajadom to Operation Green Hunt. But in 2017, just before Nambala Keshav Rao Basavraj was to step up to take the responsibility of General Secretary, Operation Samadhan Prahar was launched. And this was a strategic offensive, which the Maoist party has also recognized as such, that it is a strategic offensive, because from there onwards, they started with the encirclement of the whole Dandakaranya region and started up building multiple paramilitary camps to encircle the guerrilla zone. In such situations, such tough situations, and in the temporary setback that the Maoist party is facing, Nambala Keshav Rao very effectively took up the responsibility of General Secretary of the party, and he guided the whole movement. Actually, despite all the military offensive, despite all the ideological attack, despite all the psychological propaganda warfare being waged against the Maoist party, he led the party despite all the losses of various central committee members attaining martyrdom, and various central committee members and state committee members being arrested. He was able to guide the movement. He was able to preserve the movement. Obviously, it is the people who preserve the movement, but it is the sign of a capable leader is able to sustain, to guide a movement during one of its toughest times. When you see the statement of, I was very moved by that statement personally also, that when you see the statement of the Dandakaranya Special Zonal Committee, which was released by them hailing Basavraj, they have written that Nambala Keshav Rao, when the entire Central Committee of the CPI Maoist appealed to him to take shelter in a safer zone, to retreat to a safer place and guide the movement from there, Basavraj said that I will only be able to effectively take the leadership and guide the movement for 2 or 3 more years. It is more important to preserve this younger leadership because they are the future of the movement. And he said that that martyrdom never weakens the movement, and it will only give strength to the coming generations to take inspiration and carry on the fight. And it is the people ultimately who will persevere and who will emerge victorious from it. So I just remembered that Mao's quote that the people's struggle will rise like a phoenix from the ashes. So that was his determination also. He also had that kind of determination, and he did not abandon the front line. It is very moving to know that despite being encircled, despite facing all of that losses, he did not even once thought, when the whole party was appealing him to retreat to a safer place, he did not abandon the front line. And then I wonder what will the state do of all of its lies, when they say that the Maoist leadership is doing all this to gain money from the mining companies, to extort the mining companies, to have a better life, to send their children to abroad for studying. What will it do of all the lies? And maybe that is why they were so afraid of handing over his dead body to the people, to the family, because when his body will be handed over to the family, there will be a funeral, there will be a rally, there will be a procession, and hundreds and thousands of people will come forward to pay homage to a leader who laid down his life, who gave all of his life for struggling for the people. So to hide its lies and to carry out its false propaganda against people's struggle, the Indian state burned his body. And this kind of lies, again and again, they stand exposed. It stood exposed when Sinwar attained martyrdom on the front lines. So it's very similar, actually, how Comrade Basavraj has attained martyrdom on the front lines, just as how Sinwar attained martyrdom on the front lines when the whole imperialist media was propagating that he is hiding in a bunker, he is hiding in a tunnel, he is hiding like a rat. All the while when he was fighting on the front line, just like Basavraj was fighting on the front lines and did not abandon it. So these kind of lies, again and again, they stand exposed. And even when they burned a rebel, when they burned a people's, literally a people's hero, even in the dead of the night, the British colonial rulers burnt Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru in the dead of the night, but they were not able to kill them. They were able to kill their mortal body, but they were never able to kill their ideas and their names. The Zionist state was able to kill the mortal body of Sinwar and Ismail Haniyeh, but they will never be able to erase them from the memories of the Palestinian people. And similarly, what I think, especially because they burnt Basavraj like that, they have immortalized him in the memory of the people.
Oh, well said. I'm reminded of two things. The first is the song about Joe Hill, the Swedish immigrant to the U.S. who fought in the front lines of so many labor struggles here and was eventually killed by the copper mining bosses and framed on a murder charge and executed by the state. And there's a song about him where his comrades see him returned in the night. And they said, "Oh, you're Joe Hill. You're dead. You're dead." And he says, "Oh, what they forgot to kill went on to organize."
I've heard about that line. I have heard that line.
Yeah. And as you were talking about Comrade Basavraj's sacrifice and knowing that he would likely be killed, I was also reminded of Mao's brother and the other comrades in the Chinese Communist Party who stayed on to do work in Xinjiang, even while they knew the warlord there would eventually betray them. But they knew the work they would do was essential to preparing the people for the revolutionary movement in Xinjiang and ensuring that the imperialists weren't able to split it off in partition China. And they knew full well they would eventually be captured and tortured, but they stayed to the very last minute to advance the people's struggles. And that was essential to the victory and the ability to stop the imperialists, in particular the British, from being able to spark separatist movements there in Xinjiang to rip apart China. So yeah, it's very powerful, the background that you provided. And I was also likewise very moved reading the statement about his last, the last days of his life and the stand he took. Going from the particular back to the general, I was wondering, you mentioned earlier the peace talks. Could you talk a little bit more about these? You gave a broad overview, but could you get into some more specifics? Because some people, when they hear about peace talks, they think, oh, the Maoists are just going to surrender or something like that. They're giving up. Could you explain what the objective is here with the peace talks and the significance of the state's decision to refuse to engage in peace talks?
It's very important to understand that in what context this call for peace talk was made and who made it and how it went on forward. Actually, it is not the Maoists who first came with the call of the peace talks. Since the start of Operation Kagar in January 2024, after Brahminical Hindutva fascist RSS BJP government came into power in Chhattisgarh, and it started Operation Kagar in Dandakaranya region. After each and every encounter where they would massacre 10, a dozen, half a dozen, 2 dozen people, Maoists or civilians alike, whether they were captured or they were killed in exchange of fire, encircled, given no choice, no quarters, but just killed. After all that kind of brutal military offensive, brutal massacres, after each and every of such massacres, the Home Minister of Chhattisgarh, the Brahminical Hindutva fascist leader Vijay Sharma, would shamelessly come in front of the media and he would boast of the so-called successes of the security forces in massacring the people of the country. And after this shameless applauding of this kind of brutal massacre, he would then go on to say that we don't want bloodshed, we don't want massacre, we want the Maoists to join the mainstream, we are ready for a peace talk with the Maoists. Which each and every encounter, which each and every massacre, among of whom multiple encounters were completely fake. In multiple encounters, it was just civilians, no Maoists involved. In multiple encounters, it was just civilians who were like encircled and indiscriminately fired upon. To whitewash its crime, to like hide its crimes, he would put up this facade of being ready to engage in peace talks, being ready to engage in a meaningful dialogue with the Maoists. And this he started since the early 2024 onwards itself. So there was a lot of questions that if the state is ready, why are the Maoists not ready for a peace talk? And then what we understand is that there was a dual approach, uh, dual intention of the state in doing this kind of thing. One was to kind of uh, hide its genocidal intent, to kind of portray itself as somewhat benevolent or somebody who does not want a bloodshed, but it is forced to do so because the Maoists are mindlessly engaging in violence. That is what the state wanted to portray on the first aspect. On the second aspect, it also wanted to send a message that if you won't lay down your arms, we'll massacre you, and you have an option to come surrender. If you will surrender, you will be spared. And the third aspect was to portray to the larger people that it is not the state that is the cause of all the violence that is happening in Dandakaranya, in Bastar. It is in fact the Maoists who are responsible for the killing of the people that is being happening there. And this is what a section of so-called intelligentsia in India also propagates. The intelligentsia that is aligned with the state, that upholds the sandwich theory, also says that it is because of the Maoists that the people are being killed. It is between the Maoists and the state that the people are being sandwiched and being crushed. So this is that was the third objective of the state, to do that kind of propaganda. So there was a lot of question on the Maoists that why are you not engaging in peace talk when the state is ready to do so? So if I remember correctly, the Maoist Party the Central Committee of the Maoist Party came up with a statement in October 2024, where they specifically said that this is nothing but a facade. We should expose this facade. Indian state does not want to engage in a peace talk. It is just doing this to demoralize the fighting forces, to portray the fighting forces in a bad light, and to put the onus of all the brutalities that is happening, that is being conducted by the state, on the rebel forces itself. And it wants to hide its genocidal intent that is in the interest of the corporate loot. So they clearly said that. But they also said that if the state is really interested in peace talks, they should create a conducive environment. And then at that time, they laid down 4 conditions. The first condition was that the state must release the Central Committee member and the Politburo members arrested by the Indian state, so that they can participate in coordination with the leadership of the Maoist Party. They can participate in the peace talk with the Maoist, with the state, because of the history of betrayals of the state, where state used peace talks as an opportunity to identify leaders, to identify members of the Maoist Party and the leaders and their links and their logistical networks. And then after they broke the peace process in between, and they went on to massacre the leadership of the Maoist Party. So because of that reason, they said that you must release the Politburo members and the Central Committee members arrested by you. They will only go in peace talks with the state, not the existing leadership, which is not already exposed. So that was the first condition. The second condition was withdrawal of all paramilitary camps and halt to construction of new paramilitary camps. Third condition was halt to all mining operations and signing of new memorandum of understandings. Fourth condition was stopping Operation Samadhan Prahar, Operation Kagar, and end to all hostilities being carried out. Effectively, a ceasefire. So these were the 4 conditions that were put up by the Maoists, put forth by the Maoists. And they said that if the state really wants to engage in a peace talk, it must adhere to these conditions to create a conducive environment for peace talks. And when you now look at it from today's standpoint, with all that has happened, with the killing of Prayag Manji, one of the Central Committee members in Jharkhand, barely a month ago, and then the killing of General Secretary Basavraj a few days ago, and also the history of betrayals of by the state, where state engaging in the peace talk was used its intelligence agencies to identify networks and the leadership in 2004 also, and then after it backtracked on the peace talk process, it carried out massive military offensive against the Maoist party and ended up killing 300 of its cadres in post 2004 peace talk process, when the post peace talk process fell in 2004 between the CPI Maoist and the United Andhra Pradesh government. And then you have the example of killing of Azad, spokesperson of the Maoist party, while he was involved in a communication, in a dialogue to initiate peace talks with the central government of India. And then the killing of Kishanji, while there was a talk of peace talk between the CPI Maoist leadership and the West Bengal government. So there is three of these examples where Maoists have been killed and arrested and brutalized after the state was able to identify its networks, its leadership. So based on that kind of history and the present example also, where the Maoists declared a unilateral ceasefire and then also state went on to massacre, it is now understandable the conditions that Maoists put forth in October 2024 were just conditions. And those conditions were actually also not, except the first condition, maybe, if you can say in a very general sense, was not, quote unquote, the demand of the people of Bastar. But rest of the demands, halting of mining operations, withdrawing of paramilitary camps, and end to hostilities in Dandakaranya. These all three demands are the demands of the people of Bastar itself. It is not just the demands of the Maoist party. But we should not differentiate also, because Maoist party, which has also been recognized by the Indian state itself, Indian State's Planning Commission's committee also, that Maoist party is Maoist movement is a movement rooted in socio-economic and political questions, political inequalities prevalent in the Indian society. So by that argument itself, by this argument of the state itself, Maoist party represents the interest of the people of Bastar. So when Maoist party represents the interest of the people of Bastar, whether it is the interest of the people separately or whether it is the demand of the Maoist party, it is the interest of the people. But even if you go by a liberal argument, 3 out of 4 demands were the demands of the people of Bastar also, not just the demands of the Maoist party. So from then, again, there was this intensified, with this again intensification of military operations and various massacres, this whole talk of peace talks again started floating in. And Vijay Sharma, he shamelessly carried out with this whole rhetoric, and he never stopped with this whole rhetoric of, after every encounter, coming forward and saying that we are ready for a dialogue. So in the month of April, in the end of April, there was a roundtable conference in Hyderabad, the capital of Telangana. There was a roundtable conference by civil society, prominent civil society activists and retired bureaucrats. There was this one retired Justice Chandra Kumar of Telangana High Court. Then there was Professor Haragopal, a prominent democratic right activist and an academician in India, and multiple others, prominent lawyers were involved. And they sat down and they held a press conference of that after the roundtable conference, appealing the Maoist party and the Indian state to initiate a dialogue. When after more than a year of massacres and fake encounters and shamelessly covering that up with this whole facade of being ready for a dialogue from the state side and an appeal from the civil society and the people of Bastar for creating for end of hostilities, the Maoist party then responded. It did not come pleading for mercy, if like some people would say that Maoist party is cornered, it is encircled, so it came pleading for mercy. I think anybody who knows the history, it's not just about whether you sympathize with the Maoist movement or not. Anybody who's even a little versed with the history of the Maoist movement would know that Maoist movement, this is not the first time that the Maoist movement is facing massacres or is facing serious setbacks or is facing decimation also. Okay. It has faced brutal offensives in the past also. It never surrendered. It never capitulated. It never begged for mercy. It did not beg for mercy when it was facing onslaught in Lalgarh. It did not beg for mercy when it was facing onslaught during Salojadum. It did not beg for mercy when it was facing onslaught during Operation Green Hunt. It went on fighting. So I don't think that is a reasonable argument even for a layman. If a person sees it from the historical point of view. So what actually had happened is that the state, the Maoist party, had responded to the call of the civilians, the people of Bastar, and the larger concerned citizen of the country, that they want a peaceful environment, they want a conducive environment where there can be a peaceful resolution to things. Any Marxist force knows that as long as classes exist, class antagonism exists, there cannot be a peaceful resolution. But when the people are demanding, when the masses are facing a brutal offensive, and they are asking for a respite temporarily, or when the larger civil society is asking for a halt to hostilities, a rebel force knows to respond to it, not just to use that particular thing to its own advantage, but also to expose that whether this kind of thing is possible with a fascist state or not, whether a peace is possible with a fascist state or not, whether it is possible to coexist with a force that wants to exploit and wants to decimate anybody who resists against its exploitation and oppression. So, and that is what I think, that the Maoist party responded to the call for peace to give some kind of respite to the people of Bastar. If people think that that was the onus on their part, then also, like, even if it was not, they responded positively to it. And as Rupesh, one of the Dandakaranya Special Zonal Committee member, has said in his interview to a media channel, that they responded to the peace talks because they wanted to expose the lies of Vijay Sharma. They wanted to expose that it is just facade and it is not them who is hell-bent on bloodshed, but it is actually the state that creates the condition for bloodshed, that creates the condition that necessitates that kind of resistance by when it massacres the people's activists and people's forces. So that is the reason why peace talks, they responded to the peace talks. Now this is one aspect of it. Now other aspect of it is, historically peace talks have been used by fighting forces to their advantages also, tactically. It has been used by states also, and it has been used by rebel forces also to recuperate from its losses, to regroup, to re-strategize, and then to carry on their struggle. It has happened in the case of, if you see, in the case of Libya, when the National Liberation Forces under the leadership of Omar Mukhtar were fighting against fascist Mussolini's forces in Libya, the Libyan state offered peace talks to the rebel forces because it wanted to buy some time to reinforce its forces. The Italian fascist forces wanted some time to reinforce itself, to bring in more war machines on this Libyan soil, and that is why they gave the opportunity for peace talks. They lured the rebel forces into peace talks to gain that time, and they used that time to literally put tanks on Libyan soil for the first time in history, and then they were able to use it to their advantage. Similarly, it has been used by rebel forces also. In case of Israel and Gaza conflict that is happening, the Palestinian liberation struggle, they also engaged in ceasefire. They engaged in ceasefire because they wanted to give some respite to the people from all the massacre, all the genocide that is being carried out by the genocidal Israeli state, Zionist state, but also for the forces to regroup, to recuperate. So this peace talk, apart from an opportunity to for both of the forces to carry out its propaganda, to kind of engage in psychological warfare from both sides. The state also engages in psychological warfare when this whole peace talk kind of environment comes up. It starts peddling in lots of lies and lots of propagandas to try to isolate the rebel forces from the masses. And that's what the whole hearts and mind strategy is. So there are multiple aspects to why a rebel force or any force, any fighting force goes into peace talks with its enemy, and that is because of tactical reasons, because of political reasons, and also to create some kind of respite for the people. So I don't think that it was, and it has never come from the Maoist side that they want to lay down their arms. They want to abandon their struggle. They just said that we need ceasefire to create a conducive environment for a political dialogue. And when the dialogues will happen, they will happen on the political questions on which the Maoist movement is carrying forward. That is what happened in 2004. That is what happened in 2010. That is what happened in 2011. These were the conditions of the talks. So that nothing has changed on that aspect. It might be the case that the Maoist movement is relatively weaker from before, and that is what is giving the ideas to some certain section of the people, and that is also giving an opportunity to the state and its so-called progressive intelligentsia to peddle lies among the people and confuse the people. But this was not a call for mercy. This was a response to the call for peace by the people, and a response to expose the facade of the Indian state when it was literally standing on the piling dead bodies of rebels and the people alike, and shamelessly saying that we don't want to fire a single bullet, don't want bloodshed, we want peace. So this is what, apart from tactical reasons, there were political reasons as well as tactical reasons, but it was never for capitulation, is what I have understood.
Thanks for clarifying that. It's very helpful to see the larger historical perspective, as without that, it's very easy to be taken in by the headlines in the news media, whether from so-called progressive sources or from the Sanghi media, sponsored by big capital and foreign capital too. So the Maoists, after announcing a unilateral ceasefire. My understanding is the state did not, well, unsurprisingly, did not then go in for peace talks, did not agree to a ceasefire and continue these offensive operations. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. Actually, as I have told before also, this whole situation, states time and again blabbering of peace talks, was just a facade. They did not actually intend to come to a negotiating table. They did not actually intend to resolve this question politically. They did not intend to, and they do not intend to resolve the problems of the Indian people. They just want one thing and one thing after all. They want capitulation. Any kind of force, whether be it armed or unarmed, they don't want any kind of force resisting against corporate plunder of resources, foreign by foreign as well as domestic corporations. They don't want to stop the plunder of resources because that would upset their masters, their imperialist masters. So they do not want to do that. So that is why they are taking all the help from US in setting up NTROs. They are taking all the help from US in buying six or assault rifles. They are taking all the help from Israel in buying Heron Mark II drones and everything. They are doing just to suppress all kind of resistance forces, and to suppress any kind of resistance forces, the Indian state, after again and again, after facing setbacks, it knows very well that it cannot counter the Maoist movement solely on the military front. It is focusing primarily on the military front right now, these days, but that is not all it is doing. It has very well, in a very concerted manner, engaged in peddling lies, engaged in psychological warfare, engaged in false propaganda against the Maoist movement, funded a lot of think tanks, funded a lot of NGOs, paid a lot of so-called intellectuals to write negative things about the Maoist movement, to disillusion the people that the Maoist movement is done and dusted. It is on its last leg and it cannot succeed. It cannot proceed forward. These kind of things have been happening, and this is classic example of hearts and mind strategy. That is what hearts and mind strategy does. It engages in psychological warfare to kind of disillusion the people from the struggle, to kind of derail the people from the struggle by making them think that victory is not possible, a new world is not possible. That is what they peddle, and that is how they win. They first isolate rebels from the people by effectively shadow banning them, by carrying out a media blackout on them, jailing each and every activist and journalist who write about that movement, who speaks about that movement, and the people's concern that is at the center of the armed struggle being waged in that region and the state's genocidal war. They don't want the people's version. The people's version, the rebels version, they don't want that to come out. So they, first of all, they jail all that kind of activists. They jailed Comrade G.N. Sai Baba. They murdered him, actually. They murdered Comrade G.N. Sai Baba. They jailed lots of activists in Bhima Koregaon case, all of whom were speaking against Indian state's war on people in central India. They killed Father Stan Swami. They killed Pandu Narote. They jailed journalist Rupesh Kumar Singh, who was talking about state's genocidal war in Jharkhand and the people's struggle there. So they effectively shun the people's voices, and at the same time they use the Sanghi corporate media to peddle their lies, to propagate that it is the benevolent force, it is a force that is carrying out development, it is the force that is bringing in development and merging the backward Adivasi people with the mainstream. It does not want the people to know that the Adivasis themselves had carried out, built their own model of development. They don't want to do that. They don't want to show that there is an alternate model of development existing there. They just want to peddle this pro-corporate, pro-imperialist model of destruction that they are projecting as model of development. And for that, on one hand, they go on massacring the people and the rebel forces. They shun their voices and they propagate that we are harbingers of development and peace, and the rebel forces are the forces of destruction and darkness. So this is the contrast that they do, that they make to so-called win the hearts and minds of the people. The whole strategy, the insurgency strategy of the U.S. imperialists. That is what the Indian state is actually implementing on ground in Bastar and other tribal areas where the Maoist movement is happening. So that being said, Indian state never intended to do that kind of peace talk or any kind of resolution. It just wants to stop any resisting force, and for that it is ready to go to any extent. It will carry out raids that have been happening in India all across the country in the name of urban Naxals. It will massacre people, but it will not come to a negotiating table. That is what we have understood. And this whole peace talk thing, just like amid this whole unilateral declaration of peace talks, the killing of Prayag Manji, the Central Committee member killed in Jharkhand, and the killing of Nambala Keshav Rao, the General Secretary of the CPI Maoist, it all makes it very apparent what the state's real intentions are. Now, I would like to draw your attention to some of the facts that is unfolding as we speak. Some of the things that are unfolding as we speak. When the Maoist movement is suffering setbacks, mining operations and big mining giants are making inroads into the deep hinterlands of India, mineral-rich hinterlands of India. In the past 1.5 years, particularly the right on the day Nambala Keshav Rao was martyred, Lloyd Iron and Metals Company, the company that is mining iron ore in Surajkund Hills and Damkonda Bahi Hills of Gadchiroli district in Maharashtra, one of the guerrilla zones. This mining giant has declared that it is going to expand its mining operations, and the center has given the nod to fell 1,100,000 more trees in Gadchiroli, right on the day Nambala Keshav Rao was martyred. So we see the parallel, we see the contrast. On one hand, the Maoists are being decimated and being pushed back, and it is being projected as victory of the Indian state and a onward march to a Viksit Bharat. But on the other hand, we are seeing environmental destruction, we are seeing massive displacement, we are seeing plunder of Indian people's resources at dirt costs by foreign corporations. Not just this, Jindal Steelworks, one of the biggest mining giants of India, which is like helping foreign corporations to plunder Indian resources, declared that it will do $1 billion only, $1 billion investment in Gadchiroli for mining operations. Jindal and POSCO, the South Korean mining giant, which has US foreign investment finance capital in it, they have decided to collaborate, go on a joint venture to carry out mining operations in Odisha. Similarly, on other hand, recently Indian state has sought US aid to mine lithium. Lithium has recently been found in Jharkhand also. So that shows why Indian state is so hell-bent on unleashing its war in Jharkhand, in Saranda and other forests of Jharkhand, because it wants to suppress all kind of resistance to mining operations there, because it is seeking US help. It is seeking US help to mine lithium, to sell the precious resources that belongs to the Indian people, that belongs to the development of a new India. they want to sell it to foreign corporations, and that is why they killed hundreds of people in Bastar. They are killing dozens of people in Jharkhand. That is why they killed Prayag Manji in Saranda forest, Saraikela Kharsma district. That is why they killed Nambala Keshav Rao Basavraj in Abujmar forest. And that is why they killed Renuka and many other, countless other Maoist rebels and the people. Because they want to, literally, they want to hand over the resources of the people to the foreign corporations. That is at the center of it all. And as long as this interest remains in the center, even if we see it from a very general standpoint, as long as foreign corporations' greed for Indian people's resources remain at the center of it all, there won't be an attempt for peace. There won't be a genuine effort for peace. Indian state will never go for a peace talk, genuine peace talk, because it does not want to stop the plunder of resources. But that being said, I do not, and I nowhere I'm saying that we should not pressurize the Indian state to declare a ceasefire and engage in peace talk with the CPI Maoists. Because as citizen of this country, when there is a genocidal war being waged on the people of the country, on our own brothers and sisters, when they are being massacred in the hinterlands, far off from the eyes of the media and the comfortable middle class, we cannot sit silent and say that just because there cannot be a genuine peace talks, we should not pressurize the Indian state. We should not hold the Indian state accountable for all the past experiences and all the things it has said in the past. What happened to the Bandyopadhyay committee reports analysis, which said that the Maoist movement is a socio-economic and political is a movement rooted in socio-economic and political inequalities. What happened to Supreme Court's observation when it said that in Comrade Azad's encounter case that we cannot allow the Republic killing its own children? We should say it out loud, and we should hold the Indian state accountable to these kind of things which has said itself in the past. We should hold it accountable. We should pressurize it to declare a peace talk. We should pressurize it to conduct inquiry of highest level and hold all the senior officials and all the security personnel responsible for the murder of Prayag Manji, responsible for the murder of Nambala Keshav Rao, and all other Maoist rebels and the people. And we should pressurize them to go in peace talks with the CPI Maoists and listen to the demands of the CPI Maoists, which is the demand of the Indian people also.
Thanks for breaking that down. It's quite a stunning but unsurprisingly blatant thing that as these operations are ongoing, the government is just selling the land that people are being cleared off of, or MOUs, which effectively means selling the resources in the land, not officially selling it, to foreign corporations and giving them new access to clear cut the forests and strip mine the earth. It really speaks to the stakes of the struggle. Earlier, you mentioned the contrast between the two models of development, the people-centric model of development being pursued by the Maoists and the corporate-centric, and in particular foreign capital-centric model of development being pursued by the Indian state. But what sort of political model is the Indian state presently pursuing? I know some people internationally are probably aware of the broad contours of what's going on with Brahminical Hindutva fascism, but can you explain the total restriction of almost all democratic protests and speech in the country at present?
When you see it in totality, actually, with the advent of with the rising crisis in the imperialist order, and with the whole, especially with the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, we see that soon after there was a great burden on Indian people on the Indian state to resolve that crisis by plundering Indian people's resources. This whole thing did not start just with 2004 or 2008 or 2009. It actually started with the formation of the Indian state itself. Indian state has, since its inception, been subservient to imperialism, and it has been serving foreign corporations and imperialism. It has been serving its lackeys, uh, the domestic corporations like Tata, Adani, Jindal, and likewise, whoever has, there has been Birlas. Earlier, there was Tatas and Birlas only. These Adanis and Jindals are like somewhat newer additions to the range of lackeys that are there in India. So when you see the intensification of Brahmanical Hindutva fascism in India, we trace it with the neoliberalization of Indian market, Indian economy. When you have Indian economy being open up to foreign market and liberalization, privatization, and globalization reforms being brought in by the previous Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who very notoriously termed the Maoist movement as the biggest internal security threat. When this neoliberalization policies, neoliberal policies were brought in, simultaneously there was a rise in Hindutva offensive on the Indian people. There were massive rallies and massive Rath Yatra, the chariot processions being carried out, preceding the demolition of the Babri Masjid. It's, you must be knowing about the Babri Masjid demolition. So for those who do not know, there is a district called Ayodhya or Faidabad, which has been there is a controversy. So in Ayodhya there is this very old 15th century mosque. There was an old 15th century mosque which was built by a local ruler in honor of Babur when he was visiting there. So that mosque has stood there from 15th century, and Muslim people have been praying there. In late 19th century, there was a controversy, and for the first time, the Babri Masjid was locked, and then so on and so forth. Congress also opened it during Rajiv Gandhi period, and lot of things have been happening, and this Babri Masjid thing has been the center of Hindutva propaganda, because it was said that the Babri Masjid was built on the land where the Hindu god Ram took birth, and there was a grand temple there. And when Babur visited Ayodhya, he demolished that temple, and on the ruins of that temple, Babri Masjid was built. And this whole thing was used to create this kind of hate campaign against Muslims, Muslim minorities in this country. And this, to a great extent, actually spearheaded the whole Hindutva fascist propaganda in the country for quite some time. If you can say, it is as big and a weapon, propaganda weapon, as is Pakistan for them. Babri Masjid is equivalent to Pakistan for them when it comes to propaganda. So Indian state has used that. When in 1991 new liberal policies were being brought up, and Indian economy was, new liberalization was being done for of the Indian economy, simultaneously there were massive rallies, Hindutva rallies, massive chariot processions were being carried out. Chariot processions symbolizing Ram, the goddess, Hindu god Ram, leading an army of Hindus to reclaim his birthplace. So these kind of things were happening simultaneously when Indian economy was being open up to foreign market. And then soon after, Babri Masjid was demolished. So this was done to create a divide between the working class people of the country, to create a divide between the oppressed and exploited people of the country, so that they can be distracted, they can be put against each other, and so that the unbridled exploitation and of the Indian people's labor and the plunder of Indian people's resources can carry on forward. So from there onward, this kind of thing has been happening. In 1999, you see, before 1991, Bharatiya Janata Party was not a big party. But after 1992, Babri Masjid demolition, soon after neoliberalization happened, Babri Masjid demolition happened, this whole Hindutva propaganda got a very strong base. And in the upcoming general elections, Bharatiya Janata Party was able to form a coalition government for the first time very quickly after its formation. And from there onwards, in 2014, when again the Congress party stood exposed in front of the people of the country as one of the most corrupt parties, who had plundered people's resources, who had unleashed Operation Green Hand and Salajudum, which had carried out Operation Blue Star and massacred Sikh people, which had been complicit in and actively engaged in massacre of Muslim minorities. It had stood exposed on all these fronts. When this party was exposed, and when the imperialist powers understood, when the ruling classes understood that this party would not serve the interest of the corporations, the foreign corporations and the finance capital, they brought in the more militaristic, the more chauvinistic, the more brutal party to carry out its plan, to carry out its bidding, to massacre the people, to divide the people, to carry out all kind of onslaught on the people. And in that link only, we see that in 2022, when Operation Samadhan Prahar was concluded after its 5-year tenure, there was a big meeting in Delhi and National Capital Region. It was held in a place called Surajkund. So this Surajkund place had a brainstorming session which involved chief ministers of almost all the states, but predominantly of the states where the Maoist movement rages on, top intelligence officials, top police officials, top military personnel. All of these people were brought together, and there was a brainstorming under the leadership of Brahmanical Hindutva fascist leader Amit Shah and Narendra Modi, and they identified three enemies to what they called a Viksit Bharat. Ironically, they said that they are going to establish a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And Viksit Bharat, for those who cannot understand, is developed India. They set a timeline. They said that we have Vision 2047 for Viksit Bharat. And there are three hurdles, three enemies to it. First enemy was communist revolutionaries. And when they talk about communists, primarily they talk about the Maoists and then all forces that can resist to whatever extent they can resist. Then they identified Islamic separatists, Islamic fundamentalists, and separatists. So in that, they summed up the minority organizations. They laid down a ground for onslaught on Muslim minorities in the name of countering terrorism. Then they brought in its ambit national liberation struggle of Kashmir, national liberation struggle of various nationalities raging on in northeastern states of India, and also the Sikh minority and justification of arrest and suppression of Sikh people in the name of countering the Khalistani movement. So that is the second enemy that they identified. The third enemy that they identified is drug cartels and organized crime syndicates. So this is something that they also associate with the second aspect, with the separatist movements predominantly. They say that the terrorist movements are funded by drug money. And this is something, interestingly, this is an argument that Andhra Pradesh government has also used for the Maoist movement, that Maoist movement is harboring marijuana cartels and is selling marijuana in loads of quantities to fund its military operations. But it has been completely incapable, or I would not say incapable, it has deliberately looked the other way when 3,000 kilograms of high quality drugs were seized at Adani's port, one of Adani's ports. So when they are talking about organized drug cartels and organized crime syndicates, in the third part, they should be targeting Adani. But jokes apart, in this, they have been targeting the Muslim turned politicians particularly from minority backgrounds. You might have heard killing of one of a prominent member of parliament, Atiq Ahmed, in police custody by Hindutva goons last year. He was killed. He and his brother was killed while he was in custody, and there was this whole attack being mounted against him by the Brahminical Hindutva fascist Yogi Adityanath. So while I am in no way appealing for sympathy for Atiq Ahmed or any of such kind of like feudal forces, feudal landlord politicians, we need to understand that the attack on Atiq Ahmed, on Mukhtar Ansari, and all of these gangster turned politicians who are also feudal landlords and all, is predominantly because they represent the minorities in the parliament. And even if they do not represent their interests, they do act as a hurdle for Brahminical Hindutva fascism to completely consolidate itself, because they want, by killing these kind of politicians, they are not actually aiming to suppress any kind of resistance movement, because they are not putting up any resistance movement as such, but they want to break the morale of the Muslim minorities, that if a leader of such stature in your country, of your community, can be killed, then you should keep quiet, you should stay silent. This is the kind of message that they want to send. And also they are carrying out lots of raids on lots of organized syndicates, which they then associate with the rebel forces also, saying that these forces have been funding, have been supplying arms, and so on and so forth. So these three kind of enemies were identified in Surajkund scheme. Why I am stressing on this Surajkund scheme is because generally anybody can understand what this Vision 2047 for Hindu Rashtra is, because 2047 India is completing 100 years of its so-called independence, and which is actually transfer of power, mere transfer of power from British exploiters to the further. Vision 2047 actually was flouted when simultaneously in Surajkund's brainstorming session, they put forth this Vision 2047 for Viksit Bharat. Simultaneously, RSS, the Rashtra Swayamsevak Sangh, the big fascist organization, the mother organization of BJP, held a big conclave, and it said that it is going to convert India into a Hindu Rashtra by 2047. So we see that Vision 2047 is actually paving way for Hindutva consolidation and complete takeover of Indian state by Brahminical Hindutva fascism and paving way for more imperialist plunder of resources. So Vision 2047 for Viksit Bharat is actually Vision 2047 for a destroyed, dark, and destitute India, where it is totally subservient in the clutches of foreign powers, in the clutches of imperialism, and it is to turn India into a corporate Hindu Rashtra, and that is what it is. To that end, when they have identified these three enemies, apart from carrying out military operations, which they are carrying out in Kashmir also against the national liberation struggle there, in Northeast also against the various rebel forces there, and in Central India against Maoist rebel forces under Operation Kagar, which is part of Surajkund scheme. I need to make that very clear that Operation Kagar is a military offensive being carried out in under the all-round offensive for fascist consolidation, that is Surajkund scheme. So in Surajkund scheme, they talked about, apart from military operations, militarily tackling rebel forces and particularly Naxalism, they said we should not only, and it is, I am quoting fascist Modi in this, that we do not only have to counter the gun-toting Naxalites, but also the pen-toting Naxalites. So they brought this whole urban Naxal narrative, which they started in Bhima Koregaon case, again to the forefront. And they started for carrying out that kind of onslaught. They talked about creating a national crime database. They talked about strengthening the National Intelligence Agency. Basically, National Intelligence Agency is Gestapo of RSS. This is what it is, the Gestapo of Indian state. It is an institution used for political witch hunt and political attack on opponent forces. Then they talked about strengthening of enforcement directorates, counter to basically choke the money flow of political organizations by carrying out raid against them, seizing them their bank accounts, creating a fear among the people whoever sympathizes with them and gives them money. So these kind of things they took up in that Surajkund scheme. And since after that, there have been statements by the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, who said that the fourth front of war against Naxalism is the civil society. He talked about carrying out a fourth front of war against Naxalism by unleashing repression on the civil society. And since the early 2023, we have been witnessing that also. There have been big conspiracy cases, Maoist conspiracy cases in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. There have been big Maoist conspiracy cases in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu. There have been Maoist conspiracy cases in Chhattisgarh. There have been Maoist conspiracy cases in West Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand. There have been Maoist conspiracy cases in Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Haryana, Punjab. Basically, everywhere, wherever the people are resisting, they are building up conspiracy cases that basically resemble conspiracy cases like case like Bhima Koregaon, that resemble conspiracy case like Lucknow conspiracy case during British colonial regime. They are building these conspiracy cases and they are just simply saying one thing, is that these are overground workers and sympathizers of the CPI Maoists, and they are trying to revive the armed struggle, to wage armed struggle against the government of India. And in that name, they are jailing journalists, they are jailing democratic right activists, anti-displacement activists, labor right activists, trade unionists, peasant leaders, Adivasi leaders. There have been countless arrests. More than 120 or 150 locations have been raided all across India under these kind of conspiracy cases in past 2 years, apart from the military offensive that is being carried out and more than 500 people being killed in central and eastern Indian forested regions. So this is happening just to counter the Maoist movement, in the name of countering the Maoist movement. Apart from the brutal military offensive, brutal military separation on the nationality struggles, we have observed that Indian state is carrying out encounter killings on a daily basis in Kashmir. On a daily basis, people are being killed, and it is being passed off as Pakistan-backed insurgents. And when you say that they are Pakistan-backed insurgents, and when a foreign power is involved, it becomes much more easier for the state to peddle its fascist propaganda and also to shun other forces which might speak against state atrocities. And amid all this kind of state repression that is happening against the democratic forces, there is also this kind of self-censorship, which was not there previously, when people used to freely speak against it, come out in protest in public places. There have been massive, similar to the pattern that is being used in the name of countering Maoist movement on the military front, as well as on the suppression of democratic movements. Similar method has been used in Kashmir also. Post 2019, there have been more than 700 arrests of democratic activists, people's activists who were not donning arms, who were not engaged in armed struggle, who were just opposing brutal Indian military occupation of Kashmir. They have been jailed in the name of being overground workers of the resistance front and other militant factions. So this kind of thing is happening, and Indian state is one by one tackling and focusing on the primary enemies, the forces, the rebel forces that are giving it the most challenges militarily, politically, strategically, are being focused by the Indian state and the Brahmanical Hindutva fascist forces at the moment, because they need to focus it, they need to curtail it, especially when amid its onslaught, rising onslaught, and the deepening crisis in the society, there is a possibility of these kind of movements spreading, and there is a possibility of a strong resistance being built against Brahminical Hindutva fascism. It is important for it to consolidate itself that it counters these kind of movements. But it is not stopping there only. It is also going behind other democratic, other progressive, other left forces also. It is jailing democratic journalists like Prabir Purkayastha, who was a news laundry journalist. It's a news media podcast channel, YouTube media channel. Then there have been other journalists who have been raided and jailed. In Kashmir also, there have been journalists who are simply talking about brutal military operations have been jailed. There have been opposition leaders, state chief ministers have been jailed, who have been a challenge, not politically on the strategic front, but electorally, have been a challenge for Brahmanical Hindutva fascism to consolidate itself. They have not even spared them. They have not even spared the ruling class parties and ruling class leaders itself. So we are seeing how desperate the Brahmanical Hindutva fascism is to consolidate itself and turn India into a Hindutva Rashtra, corporate Hindutva Rashtra, and for that it is focusing and basing its military and all-round offensive on the rebel forces, but it is also going on behind other kind of forces which might put up a challenge for it in slightest possible ways. So that's the situation that is prevailing in the country right now. Hope I am able to sum it up properly.
Oh, it was excellent. It was an excellent overview and very clear. But let me just ask you, you spelled out a very challenging situation for the people. You know, this all-out assault on every level, the attempt by the RSS and their allies, imperialist masters, to consolidate a Brahminical Hindutva fascist state and society overall. But what gives you hope in the face of these very difficult challenges? Because so much of the ruling class propaganda aims at disheartening the people, at cowing them down in one way or another. So, from where do you draw hope for the future, as you don't seem pessimistic despite these difficult circumstances?
Well, we draw hope from the people's struggle itself, because that is what gives us hope. The ideology, the people's struggle, and the martyrdoms also give us hopes. Okay, and they give us inspirations to carry forward the struggle and the legacy of those who have laid down their lives in the interest of the people. I was talking about Basavraj's words mentioned in those statements. One can draw hope from there that a people's leader did not abandon the front line despite knowing that death is imminent. Lots of rebels are carrying out the fight despite being heavily outnumbered and encircled by hundreds and thousands of paramilitary forces armed to the teeth with best of technology and weaponries. They are still carrying on the fight. But above all, we draw hope from the laws of contradiction itself. We draw hope that as long as these contradictions exist in the society, as long as the contradictions keep on sharpening, the people will resist and will fight on and move forward. We draw inspiration from the history itself, from our history as well as from the history of the world proletarian revolution itself. We draw history from Bolshevik revolution, where the Bolshevik party was almost wiped out in counter revolutionary offensive in during the period of 2005 to 2007. But then it re-emerged, and just in 10 years, it was able to achieve victory. We draw inspiration from the history of the Chinese Communist Party itself, where it was encircled very badly, and they had to break through the encirclement. And in breaking through that encirclement, from a force of like 3 lakhs, they came down to some few thousands. But then they again carried forward, and after that long march, they were able to achieve victory. We draw inspiration from the history of Naxalbari uprising itself, that when the Naxalbari peasant uprising spread like a wildfire in the country, and thousands of communist revolutionaries were captured, were killed, were jailed, and the general secretary of the party itself at that time, Comrade Charu Majumdar, was tortured and killed in custody, and the ruling classes took a breath of respite and joy that they have been able to put down the resistance of the people. It again re-emerged, and it re-emerged very much strong. It re-emerged so strongly that they had to term it as one of the single biggest internal security threat. It emerged so strong that the US imperialists had to put this force as one of the most prominent terrorist force. It had to put it on the list of the main terrorist force across the globe. For them, it is a terrorist. Somebody said, Rabindranath Tagore actually said, one man's revolutionary is another man's terrorist. So Bhagat Singh was a terrorist for the British colonial rulers, for the people of India. He was a revolutionary, he is a revolutionary, and he will always be a revolutionary. Okay. Just like I think I have recited this poem before also, But a great Telugu poet, revolutionary poet, Sri Sri, said that the white man called you Bhagat Singh yesterday, the brown man called you Naxalite today, but everyone will call you a morning star tomorrow. So that is what gives us inspiration. The history, the ideology, the people's struggle, and the martyrdom give us inspirations to carry on the struggle despite all losses. And we also need to understand that in a struggle there will be ebbs and flows, there will be setbacks, there will be times of despair, but we have to keep ourselves together, we have to consolidate ourselves ideologically, politically, and we have to march on forward. We have to stand with each other, with all the resisting forces that are there across the globe. We have to show proletarian international proletarian solidarity, and we are very grateful, we are very thankful to the comrades of Marxism today also, that you have been there and you have been propagating the realities of the war that is going on in the country, and the struggle of the people. So we also take inspiration from that kind of solidarity also. And we, on that note, I would say that we should carry forward. And as Basavraj has also rightly pointed out, that no matter how much the losses are, there will, with the martyrdom never weakens the movement. With martyrdom, there will be new layer of leadership. New younger generations will take inspiration. Just like Charu Majumdar also said that from the blood of a martyr, 1,000 generations will bloom like a flower. He also said that thousands of youth will take inspiration from martyrdom, and ultimately the victory will belong to the people. So yeah, that's what I believe in. That's what we believe in, and that's why we keep on for struggling and carry forward the struggle.
Oh, thank you, Comrade. That was very, very powerful and very beautiful what you said. And having you on to talk about this is, yeah, the least we can do to support the popular movements and to expose the crimes of the Indian government and their imperialist masters as they wage a brutal war on the people. In closing, I'll share with you just one story I heard about Indira Gandhi after the martyrdom of Charu Majumdar. A few years afterwards, she was visiting Canada and she was sitting down for some official dinner with members of the Canadian government. And a waiter from India was there, and he is a sympathizer of the Naxalite movement. So he slipped into her menu a little photo of Charu Majumdar. And she opens the menu, sees Charu Majumdar, screams, and drops the menu. You know, he was several years dead at that point, but that shows she knew still how much of a threat he was.
Yes.
And,
That's what has happened with the burning of Basavraj's body also. Even in death, in not just in life, even in their death, they are afraid of them. So that's true. That's true. And they will haunt them forever, I guess.
absolutely. All right, Comrade. Thank you so much, and la salam.
Lal Salam.